Imagine working 2 jobs, exhausting yourself day and night, just to put your wife through medical school. You believed in her dream even more than your own. But when she finally became a doctor, something changed. She said you weren't good enough anymore. She changed her last name and left you behind. My name is Chris, and this is how the woman I built up destroyed me. When we got married, we didn't have much, just a small apartment, a beat-up old car, and dreams that felt bigger than our bank account. She told me she wanted to be a doctor, and I believed in her more than she believed in herself. I remember holding her hands the night she got her acceptance letter to medical school. She cried into my chest, whispering, "We're going to make it." Back then, it felt like we were a team. She had the brains, and I had the grit. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. To make that dream a reality, I picked up not just 1 but 2 jobs. Days were spent in a warehouse, nights driving deliveries until my body ached. Some nights, I barely slept, running on coffee and willpower. But every time I dragged myself home, sore and drained, I told myself it was worth it. She would be the doctor, and we would finally climb out of struggle. I thought I was building a future for both of us. What I didn't realize was that the future she was imagining didn't include me. 8 years is a long time to work yourself into the ground, but that's exactly what I did. I missed out on birthdays, anniversaries, and even funerals because I couldn't afford to take time off. Every paycheck went straight into tuition, textbooks, rent, and bills. I watched my friends move forward in their own lives, buying homes, starting families, taking vacations, while I kept stacking boxes in warehouses and working delivery shifts in the dead of night. But I never complained to her, not once. I carried the weight silently, because I thought love meant sacrifice. I told myself that when she graduated, all those long nights and endless shifts would be worth it. I would look at her in that white coat, and pride would wash away the exhaustion. I never doubted her for a second. I thought that by pouring everything into her dream, I was also securing our future. I couldn't have been more wrong. The day she graduated from medical school should have been the happiest day of our lives. I was there, clapping until my hands stung, tears streaming down my face as she walked across the stage. But when she looked at me afterward, something in her eyes had changed. She didn't beam at me the way she used to. Her smiles seemed reserved for her professors, classmates, and the people she now called colleagues. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself she was just tired or overwhelmed by the moment. But the distance grew. At her graduation dinner, she barely introduced me to her peers. When she did, it was with vague phrases like, "This is my husband," spoken in a tone that carried no warmth. That was the first time I felt invisible, like I was shrinking in a world I helped build. The more she rose, the more she seemed to forget who stood beside her during the climb. Residency changed her completely. Suddenly, I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her embarrassment. She started criticizing me constantly. How I dressed, how I spoke, even the way I held my fork at dinners with her colleagues. She called me rough around the edges, as though the man who worked himself raw for her was somehow beneath her new life. I began to feel like a shadow in my own marriage. I tried to bridge the gap. I bought flowers, planned surprise dinners, and showed up to her hospital with food when she worked late. Each effort was met with indifference or irritation. She'd push the flowers aside, barely look up from her charts, and mutter that I was being clingy. The woman I married, the one who once cheered me on through every hardship, was gone. In her place stood someone who looked at me as if I was holding her back instead of lifting her up. One evening, she came home later than usual. I was sitting at the table, waiting with dinner. She placed a manila envelope in front of me, without even meeting my eyes. I opened it, and my world collapsed. Divorce papers. My chest tightened as I read through them, hands trembling. "Why?" I asked, barely able to speak. She looked at me, expressionless, and said, "I've outgrown this marriage. You've been supportive, but we're not equals anymore." Her words sliced deeper than the papers themselves. Not equals? I had broken my body, my spirit, and my future to carry her to this place, and now she stood above me, declaring me unworthy. My appetite vanished, my hope vanished, and in that moment, I realized love could die without warning. She had been planning her exit long before I even noticed the cracks in our marriage. I thought the divorce was the deepest cut, but she went further. She filed to legally change her last name, dropping mine completely. It was as if she wanted to erase every trace of me from her story. The name we shared, the name under which I'd paid her tuition, signed rent checks, and built a life, was gone in a flash. It felt like she'd rewritten history to pretend I had never been part of her success. That was when the anger began to overtake the grief. I wasn't just losing a wife. I was being erased. The sacrifices, the long nights, the extra jobs, the endless support, all of it was being scrubbed away so she could stand alone in her new world. I lay awake night after night asking myself, was I only ever a stepping stone? Was I nothing but scaffolding for her dreams? For weeks, I spiraled into despair. Depression hit hard, and I nearly gave up. But then one morning, after staring at an empty coffee cup, something clicked. I refused to let her walk away with everything while I was left broken and broke. I had carried her for 10 years. I had built the platform she stood on. I deserved recognition and compensation for what I gave. I began researching. At first, I thought there was nothing I could do. A medical degree isn't property, after all. But then I found cases where spouses were reimbursed for the sacrifices they made during their partner's education. That was when I decided I would fight. She might erase me from her name, but she wouldn't erase me from her debt. I hired a lawyer and handed over every scrap of proof I had. Pay stubs for my second job, receipts for her tuition, bank statements showing my deposits, even the letters where she'd thanked me for making her dream possible. My lawyer explained the concept of reimbursement alimony, the idea that the spouse who sacrifices financially for the other's education can be compensated for those costs. Walking into that courtroom felt surreal. She sat across from me, polished and pristine in her tailored suit, her new world shining around her like a shield. I was the man she had outgrown, the one she thought would stay silent. But for once, I wasn't silent. My lawyer spoke the truth I had lived, and for the first time, she had to face what she had done to me. Her lawyer argued I had benefited from the marriage, as though loneliness, exhaustion, and decades of sacrifice were some kind of reward. They tried to paint me as bitter, clinging to a woman who had simply moved on. But then my lawyer laid everything out, the receipts, the double shifts, the sacrifices that spanned a decade. He painted the picture of a man who had built a future, only to be abandoned the moment it was achieved. When the judge finally spoke, my heart stopped. The ruling was in my favor. She would be required to reimburse me for the years of financial support I gave, for the tuition, and for the opportunities I lost while working myself into the ground. The courtroom didn't cheer, but inside me, a small flame reignited. Justice, however imperfect, had spoken. The money didn't heal me, but it gave me dignity. It reminded me that my sacrifices mattered, that my role in her story couldn't be completely erased. Walking away, I felt lighter, not because I won, but because I finally closed a chapter that had bled me dry. Healing wasn't quick, but slowly I began to rebuild, not for her, not for us, but for me. And in the quiet of my healing, I found the words that defined my story. I spent 10 years building a life with her, only to realize she saw me as scaffolding, something to hold her up until the real structure was complete. But scaffolding isn't weak. It carries the weight of dreams until they stand tall. And when it's taken down, it doesn't crumble. It moves on, ready to build again. This time, I will build something stronger, not for someone else's foundation, but for my own.